At 12:17 a.m. on March 22, 1944, three Wehrmacht officers walked down a narrow hallway in a requisitioned tobacco warehouse in Nancy, France, following a French civilian who claimed to know where stolen ration stamps were hidden. The hallway was barely wide enough for two men. Brick walls on both sides. A single door at the end, old and wooden, hanging slightly crooked in its frame. The civilian, a thin man in a flat cap, reached the door and pushed it open. It swung inward into the dark room beyond. "In here," he said in broken German, stepping aside. The first officer, an Oberst named Kraus, moved forward. The second, a Hauptmann named Voss, followed. The third, a young lieutenant whose name would later be listed only as W. Scheffer in the casualty report, hesitated for just a second at the threshold. The civilian stepped back into the hallway and whispered one word in French, "Maintenant." Then he grabbed an iron pull ring mounted flush in the brick wall and yanked it hard. Somewhere behind the wall, a counterweight dropped. The door didn't close. It reversed. The hinges that had been holding it open on the inside tore free from the door frame, and a second set of hinges, hidden in the brick wall on the hallway side, engaged with a metallic snap. The door swung outward fast and hard like a landslide, slamming into the hallway with the weight of an iron-reinforced slab backed by 60 kilograms of falling stone. Oberst Kraus was crushed against the opposite wall before he could even turn his head. Hauptmann Voss tried to step back and caught the door's edge across his chest. His ribs cracked like dry kindling. Lieutenant Scheffer got his arm up. The door broke it in two places and pinned him by the throat against the brick. The whole event took less than 3 seconds. When the counterweight hit the bottom of its shaft and the door stopped moving, there was no sound except a wet, rattling cough from one of the bodies and a faint creak of iron hinges settling. The civilian, whose real name was Émile Fournier, age 38, locksmith by trade, looked down at the three crumpled shapes wedged between door and wall, crossed himself once, and whispered, "Pardon?" Then he turned and walked quickly toward the back exit, where two resistance men were waiting with a pry bar to reset the mechanism before dawn. Émile Fournier had been a locksmith in Nancy for 19 years. Before the war, he repaired safes, installed door hardware, cut keys for lawyers and bankers and old women who'd locked themselves out of apartments above bakeries. He understood leverage, counterweights, pivot points, and tension. He understood that a door is just a weighted lever on a fulcrum, and if you move the fulcrum, you change what the door can do. When the Germans occupied Nancy in June 1940, they immediately began requisitioning buildings. Warehouses became depots. Hotels became barracks. A printing shop on Rue Saint-Dizier became a Gestapo substation. By 1943, the occupation had teeth. Wehrmacht officers ran the civil administration with bureaucratic efficiency. The Gestapo ran the fear, and between them, the city was a web of checkpoints, curfews, and lists. People disappeared. Sometimes their bodies came back. Often they didn't. Émile joined the resistance in late 1942, not out of ideology but out of anger. The Gestapo had arrested his neighbor, a postal clerk named Morris, for listening to a BBC broadcast. Morris was 61. He had grandchildren. He died in custody 3 days later. The death certificate said heart failure. The bruises on his face said otherwise. Émile's first jobs for the resistance were simple: picking locks on German storage rooms, disabling door mechanisms so certain buildings couldn't be secured at night, making duplicate keys from wax impressions, small, quiet sabotage, useful but not dangerous. That changed in January 1944. A Gestapo officer named Steiner had begun a crackdown on black market food networks. Nightwork. Émile stood in the hallway, breathing hard, staring at the door that now sealed the corridor like a butcher's block. He waited 10 seconds. No movement, no sound. He bent down, checked for pulses. 2 were already dead. The third, Scheffer, was dying, blood pooling under his collar. Émile whispered an apology he didn't expect forgiveness for, then turned and walked to the back exit. 2 resistance fighters were waiting with tools to reset the counterweight and hinge pins. By 1 a.m., the door was back in its normal position, hinges reattached, pull ring removed, the shaft plastered over again. When the bodies were found the next morning by a German supply clerk, the initial assessment was structural failure. Old building, old door, rotted frame gave way and door fell outward, the Wehrmacht engineer's report noted, But someone higher up didn't believe it. The Gestapo launched an investigation. They questioned the warehouse staff, the guards, the clerk who found the bodies. No one had seen anything. No one had heard anything. The investigation went nowhere. Within a week, it was quietly listed as an accident. 3 officers killed by a collapsed door in a poorly maintained French building. Embarrassing but not worth a reprisal that might expose how carelessly they'd been operating. Émile Fournier continued working as a locksmith. He repaired 3 more German locks that spring. He never built another reverse hinge door. In August 1944, when the Allies liberated Nancy, Émile watched from his shop window as American tanks rolled down Rue Saint-Dizier. He didn't cheer. He didn't cheer. He didn't wave a flag. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, and thought about 3 men in a hallway and the sound a door makes when it stops being a door and becomes a hammer. After the war, the French resistance compiled lists of operations, sabotage actions, kills. Émile's name appeared once in a handwritten note from Gabrielle's personal journal, later donated to an archive in Paris. It read, March 22, 1944. 3 enemy officers eliminated via mechanical trap, 0 resistance casualties. Method, locksmith ingenuity, no formal commendation, no medal. Formal commendation, no medal. In 1959, a military historian researching unconventional resistance tactics found the entry and tried to track down details. He located Émile in Nancy, still running his shop, still cutting keys and fixing locks. "Is it true," the historian asked, "that you killed 3 German officers with a door?" Émile looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "I killed them with a lever and a counterweight. The door was just the pivot." The historian wrote it down. The report was filed in a restricted archive and never published. Émile Fournier died in 1972, age 66. His obituary described him as a skilled locksmith and quiet member of the community. At his funeral, an old woman no one recognized placed a single iron hinge on his casket and walked away without speaking. And somewhere in the archives of the French Army's Irregular Warfare Division, there is still a single-line note in the margins of a 1950s tactics review. Note, architectural elements, doors, walls, floors, may be weaponized with minimal material and high effectiveness in urban environments. Nancy, 1944. No manual ever taught it. No doctrine ever formalized it. But in the years after, a handful of locksmiths and carpenters and engineers across Europe quietly wondered what else in a building could be made to move the wrong way at the right time. And they remembered the locksmith who'd turned a door into a deadfall and walked away before the body stopped bleeding.